In the small town of Abbeville, Kansas, which is about an hour outside of Wichita and has a population of 83 people, lies Rewild Family Academy, a microschool run by our guest today, Devin Dellenbaugh. Devin was a certified elementary school teacher in the Kansas public schools for 5 years before leaving the classroom to be a stay-at-home mom to her two children. Stay-at-home parenthood evolved into homeschooling for Devin and now into microschooling as she attracts other families to the personalized, nurturing, and tranquil learning space that she has created in her home. I had the chance to see Devin's wonderful microschool up close when I visited her rural Kansas community earlier this month. Devin Dellenbaugh, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie, for having me and for being out here. It's great.
It was so great to meet you and to see Rewild. You live in a converted church building that you've just renovated with such precision and beauty and warmth. When I walked in, there was classical music playing and candles, and it just has this wonderful welcoming space for children and adults. You can just want to linger there and get into your books and into your materials and curriculum and really just let your curiosity run with all of the materials that you have there. So it's just great to see that. And I want to get into more about why you decided to create the microschool and kind of that progression. But let's go back to why you decided to become a teacher and that experience working in the public schools before you became a mom.
Right. So, well, thank you for just experiencing all that with my home. That's kind of my intention and hope. But as far as me, I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma, and I was easily the teacher's pet. I loved my grade school experience and really connected with teachers and desired to be a teacher from that point on. When I got older, I realized just how very little teachers made and thought maybe I don't want to explore that. So I actually started my college career in some business classes and realized that that wasn't a good fit either. So I redirected and went back into my passion. And since then have just always find myself teaching in whatever environment I'm in, whether it's at home with my kids or with my peers. I feel like naturally gifted that way. So it worked out.
And so you taught elementary school in the public schools in Kansas. And what was that experience like for you?
Right. My husband and I both taught in Greensburg, Kansas, a small rural community. We loved it. We had great administration that backed their teachers wholeheartedly. And we had great peers to work with, just really desiring to help the students as best they could. So it was a really great experience and community. And unfortunately, there was a tornado that took out the entire town. And thankfully, we were able to stay on and taught for another year, but just weren't able to afford to rebuild. So we relocated to Abbeville, where my husband's family's from. And so in that process, I knew I wanted to stay at home. My husband got a teaching job in the larger town about 20 minutes from here. And so he teaches 7th grade math there. And yeah, as my daughter got older and I thought the school relocated to about 20 miles away, and just the thought of putting her on the bus at 6:45 in the morning and not seeing her again until 4:30 in the afternoon, it really began to pull at me. And I thought, well, I've been taught how to do this. Certainly I can do this. And so my journey began as a homeschool mom, but it was not something I was ever familiar with, other than living here, I began to meet other moms who were doing it. And I really had to deconstruct my own ideas of what education looked like in the home. So it was a learning process for me in that. regard.
Yeah, sort of that deschooling or that deconstruction process for you as an
Right.
educator to homeschooling. What was that like? What were some of the differences that you noticed and some of the things that you saw in the homeschooling environment that were quite different from the conventional classroom?
Right. So as I met other moms and families homeschooling, I saw just the overall connection with their kids and knowing their interests and their flexibility of schedule, whether that is just visiting their own family or having interest in things that I knew the public school didn't have. It was kind of like academic or sports. And so, yeah, and just and their values that they wanted to instill in their own children, having time to do all that. And it wasn't like forced at the end of the night at around a family meal where everyone's tired and you're still doing homework. So I liked that slower lifestyle and just the meaningfulness and the intent of it.
So then how did that evolve from homeschooling, which of course we know, as homeschoolers, it's collaborative. You're often engaging with other homeschoolers in the community and kind of after school activities as well. But you decided that you wanted to do something more like a school and create a microschool where other families would be able to come. There would be, a modest tuition. How did that whole process evolve for you to go from kind of independent homeschooling to a microschool?
Right. So, as a mom and being at home, there's a lot of positives to that, but there's also some limitations. And for myself, just Abbeville is secluded, and it was great. I started meeting with another mom, Delina Wallace, homeschooling as well, and we thought, let's do a class together. And so we started doing that and just would teach and take turns with different groups of kids. And then we would visit the rest of the afternoon and just having that social quality for the mom as well as the kids. And over time, over the years, we've added moms and then kind of grew to where we ended up hosting in a small school that was no longer used. And as that developed, and with COVID and just so many things that have just forced people to kind of look at school differently, and also just the economy and living on one income is difficult. I mean, that's a sacrifice that you do as a homeschooling parent. Um, it just began to be a strain, and so I just Delina had me listening to several different podcasts and, kind of had a vision for me before I did. And yeah, as I let that idea sink in, I began to get excited about what would it be like to be an educator that could teach however they wanted, in an environment that they wanted, uh, without all the constraints of the public school. And that got me really excited again about teaching, which is what I believed I was really born to do. So that's kind of how it evolved.
Yeah, and you told me when we connected in person that you were thinking, as you wanted to kind of get a second income. Your kids are now older. I think you said they're 9 and it's 14.
14.
14. That, was looking for opportunities for some side income. You thought about maybe being a substitute teacher in the local public
Hmm.
schools. And then, right, it was Delina's encouraging. Of course, Delina's been on this podcast and is a huge community builder for the hub of education entrepreneurship that's occurring in the greater Wichita, Kansas area. But she was saying,
Hmm.
why don't you do this? Why don't you be an education entrepreneur? You don't have to go, be a substitute teacher. You can create what you want in your own
Right.
home. And that's really
Hmm.
what you've done. So tell us about Rewild, which opened really earlier this year, kind of early January
Hmm.
timeframe, 2023. Um, what does it look like, and who is it for?
Yeah, well, certainly after COVID, but even a little bit prior, as I met just families in this area that were looking for different opportunities or were interested in homeschooling, but just didn't feel equipped or supported. And they always would say, well, you went to school to be a teacher, so of course you can do it. And I'm like, really, this is the hardest job I've ever done, just my two kids. And yeah, just in with talking with them. And then after COVID, more parents, more families just looking for something different. It, I started helping some families who, like, the mom needed to work. She works part-time, and so she wants to homeschool, but she can't do it every single day of the week. And so I would take her kids in, and we would do school together. And I began to see how it could function for me personally. Like, okay, this isn't as difficult as I imagined. And so I just kept coming into contact with more people like that. And um, as far as what I wanted to recreate in my home, I, being in the public school system, even when I was in my classroom, I still, yeah, I would turn off all the lights. I didn't like the lighting. I would open up the windows. I would I would have a candle. I would have just an atmosphere that was aimed towards just peace and not that, and it wasn't in a strict way. And I mentioned to you a book that kind of helped me in a lot of that. And it was The First Days of School by Harry Wong, and just really targeting how you want your classroom culture to be. And so that's kind of how I approached it, with how I want my home to be, how people interact with me in my home and the students. And I just want them to have the freedom to be comfortable, to enjoy one another, to sit with their friends, to ask, for help from not just me, but their friends, and just engage them in their natural, curious way of, just being. And so that's what I've really, because I have such a large space, I could have made it look like a school, but that wouldn't be what I would enjoy coming home to. So kind of, yeah, merging both was kind of, it actually forced me to be a little creative, which I enjoyed. So
It's honestly a space where I think anyone listening or watching would want to send their children. It's just so beautiful and
thank you.
peaceful. And like I said, not only the candles and the music, but you have a fire going in the fireplace. You have comfortable couches when you're doing kind of group activities or gathering spaces. And yet then the kids can also go off to different corners and do some reading or do their own lesson plans. And it just has that tranquil rhythm of kind of everyone sort of focused on their own individual work, but also having these frequent times to come together. Your program right now has about 9 students. It meets one day a week from 9 to 3. Kindergarten through 6th grade, mixed age, but you're expanding to a 3-day program next fall, and then see where it goes. But maybe you could tell us how the rhythm looks for kind of your 1-day program right now from 9 to 3. What is the typical day?
Right. So typical day at Rewild, parents can arrive anytime between 9 to 9:30. And so the students just enjoy playing mostly outside when the weather allows. And then we meet for just an assembly where we touch base with each other. We talk about classical music, composers, artists. We go over some scripture. We talk about our goals for the day and how we envision our future self, and how we want to aspire to that and what that looks like. We talk about, again, our class culture, how we treat one another, how we be helpful. We're not just giving answers, we're also teachers. And I really love the multi-age just allows for the children to take on that ownership of being a mentor. So after that takes about 30 minutes. The students spend about 2 hours working on independent studies that are their math, reading, language arts, handwriting, typing. They spend at least 30 minutes reading their book of choice, and they get to decide what they want to start with, how they want to do it. And that's the flexible part. They like having that choice. So, I might have 3 students on different couches and some are doing math together or whatever, but they like that ability to choose. And that's at this point, and will probably remain, just the students are in different types of math. Really want the parents to have the choice to decide what program works best for their student. And I'm just coming along as a guide to help and facilitate that. And then we do have a little break in there, and then we have lunch together. Again, we do some light reading, but then the students play for another hour outside. And then we have a literature study in the afternoon and a nature study. That's really kind of my desire to focus on nature and our connection with nature. After that, they have another 20-minute break outside. And then we come together and do just stations, or what you might call invitation areas, where I try to have a lot of just different types of centers that the students have interest in, whether it's painting or robotics, just whatever, various stations around the room. And as they play on those, or they can do that together with different groups of friends. But then I check in with each one of them. I call them up. I kind of go through what they did today, how they felt about the day, what were their highs and lows. And then I just go through each student on that. And then we have a cleanup time, and they all have their specific jobs that they do. And so that helps me. And then we have a closing assembly where we just, again, check in with each other, and we might sing and just enjoy or share about our day. And then, yeah, we go home. So
it's so great. And you also, you have this kind of a curriculum that the parents are able to decide what they want the kids to learn, but you provide some guidance and some help if parents are unsure, what might be a good fit. And if one particular curriculum isn't working well for a particular student, you might suggest a new one. So it is that customization and individualization that's so crucial. And then you also have this lovely learning management system that enables you to kind of see where the students are, the progress that they're making, enables the parents to also see that, and the students to see kind of the progress that they're making academically as well. So really great. So 9 to 3, this lovely rhythm with all of these breaks as well to enable kids to get around and get outside and move their bodies and then get back to some academic learning. You also offer lunch that you prepare for them, and that will also continue with the microschool into the fall. And right now, tell us about the cost structure for what you're offering. They're getting all of this amazing, material and time. And what are you charging families?
Yes, well, it's basically $25 a day. I had checked into a lot of different, well, there's not a lot of anything like that here other than a private school. And I didn't feel comfortable charging that amount, obviously, and looked at daycares, looked at and then prior to deciding this, like you mentioned, I was looking at subbing and what that would require and how much that was. And so, yeah, I felt like that's what families in our area could afford. At least for one child. It obviously goes up as if you have multiple children. So I try to, for some of the families, the option to, you don't have to send all of your children every day. You can send one child and stay home and work with the other children, or however you want to do that. So there's some flexibility there, but yeah, the price at this time is about $100 a month per day.
And that's still financially inaccessible for some of the families in your rural
Correct.
community. And I know that Kansas, just this week, actually, the House passed an education savings account bill that's moving forward in the state legislature that would enable education funding to follow families instead of going directly to school systems. so that parents would have more freedom and flexibility to decide where and how their children would learn. I wonder your thoughts on school choice policies and education savings accounts, especially for families in your community.
Right. Yeah, I just saw that this morning. I didn't get a chance to read thoroughly through. And I definitely see the potential. I would feel more comfortable charging for my time if I knew families had access to that. I know homeschool families, especially, and other people coming out of the public school system feel hesitation about what does that mean? What are the stipulations? And I thought I saw that there would be required testing, and that's something a lot of parents are like, no, I'm done with all of that. And so if I speak for myself personally, um, it would definitely be an aid as far as, getting my kids the help that they need, if there's tutoring or just the curriculum. I mean, there's so much great content out there, but it can be really expensive. And so I'd love to have money to do that. I'm not, for me, like if that required my student getting tested, I still don't have a problem with that. It's kind of a hoop that I would say you could jump through. But if the testing, then if the results from those testing meant the that there could be, things that I had to do, or if they didn't meet a certain standard, they had to, go here or whatever, that concerns me. So yeah, just mixed feelings overall about what the best approach is.
Yeah, and we always have to be vigilant about kind of the strings attached with education choice programs
Mhm.
that, sometimes have good intentions, but actually don't expand the supply of
Right,
various education options or prevent innovative learning models like
right.
microschools from accessing those programs because of kind of these standardized systems that are
Mhm.
typically favored or sometimes favored in some of these programs. But,
Mhm.
if Kansas were to create an education savings account program that was similar to what's been created in places like Arizona and Utah, where there is much more freedom for families and for providers, what would that look like for your rural community in terms of families being able to access something like Rewild?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I definitely think it would just uh, take down so many boundaries and limitations financially. I mean, you mentioned even the amount that I charge is still difficult, and it is. I have families who, if they can't make the amount, I've been paid with, meat that they have, like just ground beef, or, just extra stuff that they have, and bartering for that. And so I'd love for them to have the freedom and finances to um, have tuition to come here. But also I know, students who do have significant disabilities, or, whether it's dyslexia, to find tutoring outside of the public school system can be very expensive as well. So just all of that would be so much more accessible with the financial help.
What's interesting is that it's often rural lawmakers who oppose school choice policies because they, for a variety of reasons, they say, for one, well, we may not have a variety of private school options for families to choose from. There's really only the public school. To which I would say, well, if you open up these education savings
Right,
accounts, you'll encourage more education entrepreneurs like you.
right.
But another concern is that it may sort of change the culture in these small communities where the public school is often kind of a gathering space and a central location. And I know you've mentioned that as an issue as well. I wonder if you
Mhm.
can talk a little bit about those concerns and maybe still why you think school choice is a positive for rural communities.
Right. Yes, I do. I have many friends who are working in the public school system, and I know that their heart and their desire is to help the student, and and I see how actively involved they are in their communities, how the community is just a hub, and that's really positive. And I don't want to take away from that. Um, and so I do have mixed feelings as far as what's best. I wish I guess my hope would be that the public schools and administrators, local administrators, would not, instead of putting up resistance, start generating ideas of how they could work together and partner and outsource or apply some of the same concepts. And um, you know, if you're a teacher, you have an excellent teacher, but they're burdened with 25 students, they're not as effective as they would be with 15. So what ways can we look at of working together for the student, as instead of, worrying about the money? But I think Delina spoke with you. I don't know if you got to meet with the administrator from Central Christian, but he was really eager to partner, and as they're building on having a classroom, having a science lab, which is not something I have in my house, obviously, but to have access to that as a micro school teacher, if public schools could kind of start looking that way instead of just throwing up resistance right away and worried about losing funding.
Yeah, and you mentioned also this trend in recent years, especially in more rural communities, of consolidation. Of course, it's happening everywhere, but particularly in rural communities where you're getting kind of larger schools instead of a small neighborhood school, and the schools are
Right.
often further
Mm-hmm.
away. You mentioned that that was one of your
Right.
reasons for choosing homeschooling originally, is you didn't want to have your 5-year-old on a bus at 6:45 in the
Mm-hmm.
morning and a long bus ride to school and not home till 4:30 in the afternoon, you said,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the distance. And so, right. So if the trend now in these alternative education spaces is more, smaller, more micro, then
Mm-hmm.
being able to kind of bridge that gap. And you mentioned that some of the
Right.
traditional private schools in the area are trying to be creative and think about ways that
Mm-hmm.
they can meet different preferences and needs in the community. And it would be nice if public schools would do the same thing to really work together.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, as you think about the future, Devin, and growing this microschool, what are your hopes for fall when you expand to 3 days and more families? You'll also be doing some more community collaboration with some outside instructors in the community one of those days. What is it going to look like?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited, mainly just to find the community, to get it established as far as who's attending, and then just really exploring what our resources are together. I mean, I have this resource that I'm offering, this place, these, my passions and desires. But when you find out, that one parent maybe loves a particular science or something like that, and just incorporating. And so there's a part of me that's really excited about really not knowing exactly what it's going to look like. I mean, and that's, rewild is a term I have on my website as far as what conservationists use to, help an ecosystem return to a sustainable, biodiverse, system, as opposed to, all of our lawns looking green and, you know, all the same thing, cookie cutter look. And so that's kind of what excites me about as I move forward, is I don't exactly know exactly what it will look like, but I know it's going to be diverse. I know it's going to be unique. And every year I think would be unique, because I'm drawing from the community that I'm working with and that I'm interacting with, and all of their students are unique. So that keeps me kind of excited and moving ahead, but also a little nervous.
And do you think that this microschool movement in rural communities is possible in terms of expansion? What is your sense around kind of education innovation in smaller towns outside of urban hubs? How does that look to you, kind of going forward? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I've already met with some teachers who are eager to get out of the current system. They're not eager, they love the teaching, they love teaching, but the system that they want to leave. And so just having a vision is difficult if you've not seen it done another way. And so that's one thing that I'd like to do and plan to do, is just um, have open houses for people to come, not just the families, but educators also, and see how it can be different and effective and creative, and just to restore that fire that they had originally. And so I think within that, you can see a variety, just like we see in Wichita, of educators saying, I want to do it this way, or I want to do it this way. And that's what's exciting. And then fitting that to the parents. And so I hope that I have people obviously in my community, but it's a very, very, very small town. So it's not even typical as far as, having a grocery store, but people still talk, at church, and they talk around at the post office, and they're interested in what I'm doing. And so just having those conversations and inviting people to come and see, I feel like is what people need in order to move forward in a positive way without such, fear and resistance.
It really is worth seeing. I mean, I think that sometimes when we think about a home-based microschool, there might be kind of different visions that people have of what that could look
Mhm.
like. And it's just so extraordinary. It's honestly one of the things that you say when you leave your microschool, I think, is, gee, I would love for my child to attend. It's
Mm.
kind of exactly the kind of learning environment that I think most parents would really love for their kids. And I love that you're
Mhm.
looking at not only bringing parents in to see what is possible and hopefully enroll their children, but also bringing educators in your community and
Mhm.
from kind of your larger area to see what's possible and inspire them. If there are viewers or listeners of mine, though, that live outside of Kansas, maybe you'll do a webinar for them as well. But what advice would you have for someone who maybe isn't able to kind of see what you've built, but wants to do something similar, wants to create a microschool, particularly a microschool in a rural community like yours in a small town? What advice would you have for them?
Oh, I just conversations with like-minded people. Just I've been influenced by others, not just in the Wichita area, but just researching and finding. I don't know if you've seen, there's a Wonder Garden is on Instagram. There's a lot of homeschool moms that put their content on Etsy, and it's inspiring to see. And so really researching and connecting with people, obviously, and just believing that if you have the desire, um, there's no limitations right now as far as I can see. And so I think that if that's something that really excites you, then to just, take that first step and look for a community who's looking for what you have to offer.
And I think it's great that you have gone back to that initial interest in business as well. And it's kind of combination
Right.
now with education. You've
Uh,
come full circle as an education entrepreneur, putting all of that to practice in your community, and just great to see what's happening there. Devin, what do you see as the future of microschooling and innovative learning models, not only in the greater Wichita area, which, as I mentioned, truly is an emerging hub of these programs? We just had an event that you were at recently where we had about 40 education entrepreneurs from around the area who are building incredible microschools, low-cost private schools, learning pods, homeschool collaboratives, hybrid schools, all kinds of different options, tutoring services and programs.
mhm.
It's really exciting to see. Do you think that that momentum will continue in the future? What do you see as the future of education?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, it's exciting that, just recently having some laws passed and seeing some budging in that direction. Just the whole landscape of education changing is exciting. And because I know parents and teachers alike have been frustrated for so long. And so I look forward to seeing, these little people coming out of this movement, like the adults that we're getting to help shape. And so that's exciting to look at towards the future, when before, like I said, my husband still works in the public school system, and it's just so discouraging to have to just fight. Every day is a fight. And so I just think people are ready to be done with that. And hopefully our legislators, our government will really see it as an opportunity to allow people to really flourish in their gifts and strengths.
So, Devin, how can my listeners and viewers find you and learn more about Rewild?
Well, I do have the website, Rewild Family Academy. I am on Facebook as well and Instagram. So those would be the first places to look and check things out. I'm actually still fine-tuning the website as far as my exact specifications. And so, I tell people that want to share about it, it's still tentative. It's not, nothing set in stone yet, but that's kind of, this is my hope. This is my desire. So.
And you're already doing it. I mean, this microschool is lovely. There's clear demand for more of it. And you're showing that microschooling in rural communities can be a beautiful option for more families, and encouraging other entrepreneurial parents and educators to follow in your footsteps. So I wish you so much luck, not only the rest of this year, but into the next academic year. Devin Dellenbaugh, thank you again for being on the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And again, thank you for all that you're doing and just the willingness, like I said, to be a voice for those who are starting out on this journey. It's really great. Thank you.